So, welcome back to Connecting in Credentials, where we are focusing on technology. Here, this session is combining two technologies for you to create your very own vector database. I want to tell you a little bit about why we do vector databases, what it is, and then the two technologies we are going to quickly walk you through so that you are set up to build vector databases into your builds. Why would you even do this? Well, in the cocktail recipe, the very foundations of AI are based on data. So, because AI is not thinking and it is probability, it's very closely trying to get to the answer you want to hear from your prompt. So, you would have already done your prompting cocktail, which gives you the 8 elements in terms of what you need to do to make the right mix in terms of the AI agent instruction. So, it has fewer or less or zero shots to get to the answer. However, if you think about that journey to the shots to get to the answer, there is the other side of the equation, and that is the data. So, the data of which you base your answer on is critical. And that's essentially why you can get slop or some horrific things happening over the AI agents and things like Grok. The fact that the data used had pornographic data within it is part of the challenges that we see in society. So I want to make sure you understand what a vector database is. It is creating a database that gives you more accuracy. It gives you some of your secret sauce, so it better knows you, who you are, what you do, so it can differentiate and you're not producing slop. It allows you to retrieve and get to those answers. And if you are working in an area of bias, for example, say, for example, pharma, we're not going to do any pharma stuff here, but say you were, if you think about the data of which solutions are based on, predominantly they are not on females, the very life givers that are here. We are often not even in the equation in terms of data or in terms of voice. Clinical trials did not begin to a lot later, which means that our data is not there when it comes to cardiovascular health. And then you go on to global majority, and then you go on to neurodiversity. And a lot of my doctoral work in human design, that bias goes downstream into creating significant issues.
We're going to have to make a little trouble later.
So if you know how to design your own retrieval augmented generative database, which is the basis for your AI assistant, your digital you, and your queries, you can have better outcomes. And that is what we're going to do here today. Yeah, that's the why. And so the two elements that you're going to use are Vectorize and Qdrant. What do they do, Chantal? Vectorize is basically getting your data into shape for the database. Qdrant is the database, but the two interact. What do we essentially do within Vectorize? We shape that data into size of text and how much the text overlaps. Let me give you an example. My dear son has built a dictation tool to help him practice his German. The dictation, which you can buy on a USB in Switzerland for what they're teaching on German, is typically a page. So when we first built it, there were very short exercises, but not enough for what he's doing in school. We had to increase the size of the chunks of data. It's called chunks. And then the overlap. Why is this? Again, it comes back to the data being probability and AI not thinking. It is looking at the data and forming and understanding the relationship and context. If I say black out, is it that I blacked out passing out? Or is it a blackout in terms of electricity? Now, the context in the conversation of the prompt and being able to go into a database to pick up the words and the relationship between them is a vector. It's a web of words and then the context between those words. And when you are building an NAN, you're reaching into that database and you're getting those words. So when you see your tokenization racking up, sometimes words are not full words, they're split into chunks themselves, essentially. Not trying to get too technical, but trying to make sure you understand why we need to vectorize that before we then come and put it into the database. Now, the best way to do this is for you to do it and learn and apply it to your NAN build. So you can sign up and log in to Vectorize. You get a free database vectorization shaper, essentially. And you need to come down to new RAG pipeline. You will get the ability to build a pipeline. So I'm going to call this pipeline I've got my Swiss keyboard on, so type the other way around. Systematic X. Now, before you go into the build, you would have had to created a folder with what you want to upload, because you are essentially uploading documents. And those documents will be your source documents, which you're going to upload. When you upload them, you are then going to come to extractor and chunker. That's exactly as I just described with my son's dictation, which, for example, was a page. Chunk size was a little bit more than 400, around 750 for me to get right. But that's not to say 500 isn't right. If I want short, sharp answers in terms of my queries, those can be shorter. It just depends on what needs to be done. Sorry, just to go back, I looked at chunk sizes, but do you want a fast extracted chunk, a mixed or vectorized iris? I tend to use mixed because I have both images and text within my data. Chunking strategy, is it paragraph, sentence, or fixed? I tend to leave that paragraph. Chunk size we've done. Chunk overlap, you can increase or decrease. It's just how much is overlapping in terms of context. I tend to leave that at 50. Iris metadata extraction, I don't use, because when you turn this on, this is actually about if you are uploading like forms or deep government knowledge. The embedder is the embedding tool that you will need or use. I use OpenAI embedding, and then the vector database, you are linking it to your vector database, your quadrant here. So you're not using the OpenAI one, you're using vector. So let's start with this one. So select source. You would go to file upload unless you have something on your Dropbox. And you'll see I actually already had, because actually I deleted so that I could show you and I need to build again. I deleted from here. You would put add new connector. You would then type brand, for example, or no, sorry, like MSP, which is multi-programs, or whatever is relevant to you. And then you are going to, let me just go to, I've got a folder for vector database. You would then go to there and you would upload your files, okay? You could do it for things that make sense to you. For the purposes of time, I will just use my old files and I will add them here. So you can just see I'm going to add them through. And what you're essentially doing here is you are structuring the second digital U for what you use. So you will see here I've got AI governance. You will see here I've got Otto Sharma. I am MIT Otto Sharma qualified and done work in terms of facilitation. You will see here I've got the UAI Act. I have ORSC coaching, organization relationship systems coaching. You can have past proposals in terms of helping you to generate proposals that you typically want to have a first stab to get 80% right. Always, for me, needs human oversight. So you can only but imagine how you can apply this to increase the size and wisdom. This is about putting your wisdom into a database so that 26 plus years you on in terms of your career and totally in menopause, I can go F menopause, because all of it is here. It's going to help doing that heavy lifting for me. I am going to keep the chunk sizes here. I'm not building a dictation tool. I'm going to have it mixed. As I was saying, I tend to use mixed. Iris meta extraction. There is no meta extraction. I don't want to use built in. I want to use bring your own AI platform, and I want to use OpenAI, and it has my credentials. So on the left-hand panel here, you'll see this like little teaching hat or graduation hat. AI platforms let you integrate Vectorize. You need to click New API Platform, and you can choose from here, be it Anthropic or so forth. But I, for example, have OpenAI. You need to name it, and then you need to go to OpenAI. As you hopefully seen many times before, you go to Dashboard, you go to API integrations, and you would create your own key. Mine's all blocked out here. I have different vectorized keys. Create new key, and you come here and you put the API key in there. Okay, let's go back. So we now have the OpenAI embedder, but then we want to select the database. You don't want built-in, you want to bring your own. And we want Qdrant. And you are setting up a new connector, and you need to name it, and you need to get your host and your API key. Okay. Now, how do you get your host and your API key? You would have logged in and set up your Qdrant database. So you're going to come into Qdrant, you're going to go to clusters, you're going to create a cluster. That will give you an API key. You copy that. You only get that once. That will then give you a cluster ID and an endpoint. Your endpoint you copy is your host, paste in your host, and then your API key. That allows you to create your integration. Now, of course, we already have our integration. So I'm going to go bring my own. I'm going to select it. I'm going to name it Systematic X Consulting. Deploy RAG. I'm going to click Deploy RAG. And we need to wait for it to deploy. You can see it working. And this might take some time. And it's finished. So as you can see, documents are being uploaded. It keeps increasing here. You've got pages, vectors, 77, and you can see the source documents. That will then be basically integrated already then with your Qdrant, so that when you come to NAN, I'm just going to create a new workflow. I'm just going to make it a manual trigger, click the plus sign and do AI agent. Okay. And I'm going to add, for example, a tool, and I can add Qdrant vector store here, and I can choose my database. That is the better model and way of doing it. And you can see how you can update, keep your database great. I do in the AI assistant give you a cheap way to do it, which is by using Relevance AI. And I share that with you in the actual build because it's so quick. But this is the better way of doing that. So one more thing, when you are in your cluster, you will have at the top right cluster UI. When you click on cluster UI, you get your cluster UI, and you get a whole lot of information about your cluster. You want the size of length of that cluster. And so at the moment it's got, if I scroll down, it's got default vector length 1536. When I do the build, for example, in the website query, I show you where to put this number in. You need that number, otherwise it will error, but you need to understand where to get that number in. So that's essentially, where do you get that number? So we have prepared your data in Vectorize to have it in the right shape, ready for your database. We have connected you to Qdrant by you creating a cluster for that database. And then I've shown you how do you go and get that length of your cluster as a critical element that you need for NAN to make it work. So that when you put and add your Qdrant database, which could be added onto many different possibilities of automation and AI and your productivity. So that was Connections explaining for you how to do your own RAG database.